Yo, what's up, man? Hector here. So, doing today's podcast in the truck. Got to do what I got to do. I'm waiting in line to pick up my kids, and my kids' school is crazy. I've played with different times, and like they get out of school at 3. If I get here, I remember the first day of school, I got here like at 10 till 3, and the line was out the parking lot all the way down the end of the road. And so I started getting here a little bit earlier and earlier and earlier, and it would take me a whole hour to get to the door to pick them up. And their school is like, you're not allowed to get down. You just pull up, and then they put them in the car. And so I've played around with several different times, and I have got to the point to where if I get here, I'd have to get here at 1:30-ish, 1:30, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4 cars ahead of me at 1:30, and they don't get out until 3. So it's either get here at 1:30 or don't bother to get here until 3:30, 3:45. Because if I get here at 3:30, 3:45, the line is super short and I can just drive right up and I'm right in line to pick them up. Anyway, I am here waiting to pick up the kids, and I figure, you know what? No better time than to do this podcast, share my thoughts with you of what I have for today. Because I'm trying to be as consistent as I can. That's been my word for this year of 2022. And even if that means me doing this video here in my truck while I wait for my kids, then I guess that's what it's got to be. So let's dive right in. I got an interesting episode for you today. So today's daily wisdom, I've got it here on my iPad right in front. So I've got some notes, but I'm going to read it. I like the translation. So I've got 2 Bibles. I got a Bible that I have at my house. That's my main Bible. It's called the Divine Mercy Catholic Bible. And so that's kind of like my main Bible. But sometimes I don't like the translation of that. And I've got a New American Standard, New American Bible here. And I really like the translation. Sometimes, and I even have a Douay Rheims, like old school Catholic Bible. That's one of the first original translations ever created. And so I'll kind of cross-reference these if I'm not understanding something in particular. So I'm going to read it from the New American Bible here, and we'll break it down, and then we'll kind of dive into the readings and what it means for you. So we are chapter 6 of Proverbs. And for context, this is a miscellaneous proverb, and I'll kind of break that down based on, and another reason why I like this Bible, I'll kind of dive into that. But this is about going against surety of one's neighbor. That's the context here. And so just that syntax of words, I didn't understand what that meant, so I had to do some digging and research, and I wish they would just say what the dang word means. Anyway, let's get into it. This is going to be verses 1 through 5. So chapter 6, 1 through 5. My son, if you have become surety to your neighbor, given your hand in pledge to another, you have been snared by the utterance of your lips, caught by the words of your mouth. So do this, my son, to free yourself, since you have fallen into your neighbor's power. Go, hurry, rouse your neighbor. Give no sleep to your eyes, nor slumber to your eyelids. Free yourself like a gazelle from the hunter, or like a bird from the hand of the fowler. And so like the original, like the original one that I had written here, this is from the Ascension Press Divine Mercy Catholic Bible, is if you are ensnared by the utterance of your lips, caught in the words of your mouth, then do this, my son, and save yourself, for you have come into your neighbor's power. Go, hasten, and importune your neighbor. So that says importune your neighbor. This says rouse your neighbor. Okay? And so the context here is going against surety of your neighbor, but it's also it's basically like practical, like admonitions and warnings for us, for me, for you. And so essentially that surety is taking responsibility for. So what I like about this New American Bible here. I don't know if all the New American Bibles are like this, but this is my little travel one that I keep in my truck. And then I have the main one that I read every morning. And I got that at the house. So I leave this in my truck. And so in the back, it's got notes. I don't know if you can see this. It's got notes of every single book that's in here. Like throughout every scripture, there might be asterisks, there might be little numbers and letters. And in the back of every book, there's a reference. And it's almost like a deeper breakdown of exactly what's happening, the context. As remember, I've talked about this in several episodes. Be very cautious. Like, you cannot lean on your own understanding, like Christ says that himself. You can't lean on your own understanding, especially like of Scripture. That's why there's 40,000 plus denominations of Protestant Christianity. So we cannot lean on our own understanding. Just because we don't understand something or we have our own understanding of it, he has his own understanding, he has his own understanding. We don't agree, so I'm going to go start my own church. That's what this has turned into. And so we can't lean on our own understanding. The Holy Spirit doesn't talk to us individually, separately. It's just not the way it works. Okay? So, I like to get good context here so I can better understand what I'm reading, and then I run stuff like this by my own spiritual mentors and by the church and figure out, like, am I understanding this correctly? So that's what I like about this little Bible that I have with me, is it gives me good context. So if I look in the back, it breaks down chapter 6, and it says here, kind of about that reading, it says, so it starts off with my son. And it says here, unlike other instructions that begin with my son, this instruction does not urge the hearer to store up the Father's words as a means to wisdom, but only to avoid one practice, going surety for one's neighbor. Going surety for one's neighbor. The warning is intensified by repetition of neighbor and freeing yourself, the mention of bodily organs and the imagery of hunting, given your hand in pledge, struck your hands. That's kind of not making sense, but anyway, I'll continue on here. This was probably the legal method for closing a contract. Giving your hand in pledge. Okay, that makes sense. To become surety meant intervening in favor of the insolvent debtor and assuming responsibility for the payment of debt, either by obtaining it from the debtor or substituting oneself. Proverbs is strongly opposed to the practice, apparently because of the danger it poses to the freedom of the one providing surety. So that helps, that just kind of gives me a good understanding of like what's happening there. So, the whole, like, if basically when you're offering surety for someone else, you're falling into their power. It's almost like they now have power over you because it's like you're taking on their debt, right? Essentially, right? You're vouching for that person. So we want to be mindful of who we vouch for in life. We want to be mindful for who we take responsibility for. And, the readings the last several days have been about, in the message of the gospel, have been about, loving my neighbor, loving my neighbor as myself. Like that's the overall like theme of the gospel, right? But I think, like anything, we can take things too far to where we love someone to the extent of we take 100% responsibility for them. We make excuses for them. And we can do that for our children too. So we are being warned, we are being cautioned not just to practice prudence and to not go one extreme or the other. Okay? And then he says here, unless you're caught in the utterance of your lips, right? The words of your mouth. And so, to me, I'm hearing, practice temperance with your words. Be careful of what you say. Be careful of what you commit to. And it reminds me of I believe it's rule number 10. I believe it's rule 10 in Jordan Peterson's book 12 Rules for Life. It's be precise in your speech, right? So be mindful of the words that you're saying. Be mindful of who you're stepping up for, who you're vouching for, of who you're making excuses for, because ultimately you're going to be taking responsibility, for that person or those people. And in that case, you now kind of fall under the power of that insolvent debtor, as the scripture said. And essentially what you're doing there is you're now taking on his problems, his or her problems, right? And so you can't do the work for someone else, right? That person has to be held responsible for their debts, etc., for their own tasks. Look at it from let's look at this from like a strength training perspective, okay? Like, how easy would it be for me to, and I've been guilty of this, and which is great that I'm learning these things, is how easy would it be for me to take responsibility for the results of my students, right? To try to do the work for them. If I become surety for my students, I am now in their debt, right? Making life easier for them. Making it easier for them to blame me for their results or the lack of their results. Because I've heard this from time to time. I see this on social media, but I've heard this with own students that have worked with me. Is, I don't want to think, just do the work for me. I don't want to think, just tell me what to do. I get that. Had a stressful day, but I want to make sure that you understand what's happening. I want to make sure you understand why we are doing what we're doing. If I just, let me just do it for you. Let me just plan out your numbers for you. Let me just yes, it is my duty, and it's what I love doing, to provide the framework and the training plans and the parameters for your eating habits and things like that. But you still got to do the work, right? And so if I try to make your life easier for you, if I try to make excuses for why, you had a tough day, you can have alcohol and things like that. That is making their life easier. And life is not supposed to be easy. The journey is supposed to be hard, right? It's, the way is hard that leads to salvation, as the gospel says, right? And so it's going to be easier for them to blame me for their results when I try to take responsibility for their results, right? By trying to make their life easier, by trying to make their journey easier, right? And that's ultimately what the readings are about today. The readings are about doing the hard work. In the first reading today, and my iPad and everything is freezing up because it's probably in the damn sun, is from Acts. In Acts, Paul and Barnabas are out, they're doing the hard work. And literally the first reading of Acts opens up with Paul and Barnabas. Paul is basically stoned to death. They stone this guy and leave him for dead. They drag him out and they just leave him for dead. And eventually the apostles come and everything, and they he gets up and they enter the city, and on the following day him and Barnabas leave for somewhere else. And so Paul is pretty much stoned and left for dead, but he continued regardless of the hardships that he knew he was going to encounter. And he answered the call regardless. He entered in there regardless, because it was in one of the previous readings of the day. It said, hey, I understand, we all know that we are going to have to endure many hardships. Life's not going to be easy. Life's not supposed to be easy. Training is not supposed to be easy. Lifting this barbell, doing these dips and push-ups and pull-ups, this isn't supposed to be easy. Eating, staying consistent with your eating isn't supposed to be easy. Like, it's supposed to be hard. Yes, you're going to fail. Metaphorically, you'll be stoned like Paul, right? You'll be knocked down. You'll feel like you've been beaten to the ground by life with like all the challenges that you're going to come across. That's going to happen. But that's supposed to be hard. That's tempering. You're being tempered, right? And you can't make a sword. You can't make a samurai sword or a blade without it being tempered. I mean, even Christ suffered. Christ was tempered during his passion, death, and resurrection, right? It says here, Christ had to suffer and to rise from the dead so he could enter into his glory. So Christ had to suffer to enter into his glory, and to a certain extent, you and I will have to suffer. Some people will have to suffer more than others. Some people do suffer more than others, but you and I will suffer across the 5 elements of a strong man. We will suffer in our mind and the thoughts the meaning that we're giving to our thoughts. We will suffer in our body, right? And that suffering could be the strength training and the jiu-jitsu and the lifting and the eating. We're going to suffer in those pieces. We're going to have challenges in those pieces, in those elements. Strong in our emotions. We're going to be challenged every single day with our emotions. Many people suppress those emotions, and what you suppress comes back with a vengeance. We will suffer spiritually. We will suffer in our religion. We will suffer there. We will suffer communally, our family. Like, a marriage is not always easy. I mean, my wife and I just celebrated 14 years of marriage the other day. And 16 years total. We dated for 11 months, engaged for 11 months, married 14 years. So I think this July would be 16 years total. And so it's not an easy path, right? Your community, your relationship with your mother and your father, your wife and your children, that's not going to be easy. You will suffer across all 5 of those elements. And to some degree, here's the good news is, because things aren't as extreme as they were in the times of the Lord, is you actually get to choose your hard. You get to choose what that is, right? The strength training, the eating, you get to choose that, right? It's kind of like, I don't know who I heard say this, but it's like, we're all going to have problems, but choose your problems. Do you want to not take care of your body, not eat the right way, not strength train, not do these things that are good for you? Then your problems are going to be being overweight, all the self-doubt, your confidence is going to be crushed, your clothes aren't going to fit, you're going to hate the way you look, you're not going to have energy, you're not going to be able to play with your kids, name all the chronic diseases that come along with that. That's the hard that you chose. Or you choose the hard of getting up early, doing the strength training, getting out for your walk, doing those things. The hard becomes doing those things in and of themselves. The hard becomes you got to eat more because you're so active now, right? The hard becomes, just name it. Like, there's many. The hard becomes your clothes fit better, so now you got to buy new clothes. Like, you get to choose your hard, right? But the first battle always comes from within. And that's why a lot of my episodes here have shifted to more of like a spiritual, religious based, because the battle is always within. That's where it starts. The battle is always a spiritual battle. And the battle always starts within. The battle will always start within your mind, because our brain is gathering information 24 hours a day, every single day. It's the whole, like, your brain, the way your brain was designed is to keep you alive, keep you safe, avoid pain, seek pleasure. Like, that's all it's trying to do. Then from there, your mind kicks in. Your mind starts to give meaning to that information that you're gathering, right? Begins to interpret that information. And based on the information that you gather, you begin to tell yourself a story. And these stories dictate the outcomes of our life. Right? So the second battle is in the body. Again, this is where you get to choose the physical battle, right? This is the domain of strength training. This is the domain of martial arts. And this is, this is where I would say, your virtues are formed also here. Patience, courage, prudence, fortitude, discipline. These are all things you begin to acquire and cultivate all through grabbing that kettlebell, stepping up to the barbell, deadlifting the barbell, knocking out your chin-ups, your dips, doing these things. You're developing patience, right? Like, I think it was on Andy Frisella's show, and it just stuck with me. And it's like, yeah, I think that's actually how I've become a more patient person. For a long time, I still deal with it, just better at it. I've dealt with rage for a very long time. I would get triggered easy, and anger would lead to rage, and that rage would lead to many dark things. But I've acquired the virtue of patience, courage to do the deep inner work that's required to be a better man. And a lot of that you can find in strength training. But Andy once said something on his podcast, and he said, one of his mentors said to him, it's like, because I think Andy was like, how do I be more patient? He goes, if you want to be more patient, you need to do things which require patience. To be patient, you need to do things which require patience. And that just made complete sense to me. And how jiu-jitsu has been able to help me for these 21 plus years. Jiu-jitsu requires patience. Learning a martial art, playing an instrument, strength training, eating to see the results, that requires patience, right? So if you want to become a more patient person, you need to do more things which require patience. St. John Paul II said, the sports is the training ground of the virtues. And I've made a small adjustment to that. And I've just said the physicality in general. Physicality is the training ground of the virtues. Playing sports, martial arts, strength training, just anything that's physical is the training ground of the virtues, right? Like I mentioned, patience, courage, prudence, fortitude, discipline, all these things are acquired through element number 2, being strong in your body. The third battle is for your emotions, which are triggered by your thoughts and the stories that you've been telling yourself, right? Anger, rage, which lead eventually to guilt, shame, anxiety, happiness, sadness. And the good news is you have complete control over these emotions. We might think that we don't have control over any of this stuff, but we have complete control over this, believe it or not. You have control over how you express these emotions, right? Many guys they don't know how to do that. I didn't know how to do that for the longest time, which is why everything just went straight from anger to rage, and then suffering the consequences of the rage, right? But you have control over how you express the emotions. You have control to find the root cause of those emotions, and you can make the decision to feel or experience those emotions, right? You can feel or experience them, or you can live them. And here's the difference. The truth about your emotions is emotions are to be felt, not lived. You should feel your emotions. Your emotions are warning signs. Your emotions are warning signs. So think about driving. You're driving down the street or driving somewhere and you see a warning sign. Let's say that's an emotion. And then all of a sudden you start to see the same warning sign over and over, which means you're experiencing the same emotion over and over. Anger, rage, guilt, shame. Anger, rage, guilt, shame. You start noticing you see the same warning signs. If you're seeing the same warning signs over and over and over, that means you're doing something wrong. That means you're doing something wrong. You're going in circles. So you need to stop, right? But if you're experiencing new emotions, let's say you're stepping into like a new venture, you're starting a new business, or you're doing a new strength training program, or like whatever that is, and you start to experience emotions that you don't normally feel. So example for me, I started experiencing anxiety. I've never been an anxious person. I've never dealt with anxiety, but I was building the Better Man program. I shared a little bit about like how I felt like a fraud and all these things. I was building that, and then I started feeling new emotions, anxiety, whatnot, self-doubt. I started feeling these things. So whenever you're starting to feel new emotions that you don't normally feel, that's actually a sign that you're on the right track. And it's okay to feel those emotions, but you should not live those emotions. And if you're noticing that you're living those emotions because you're experiencing them over and over, they're warning signs. And if you're seeing the same warning sign over and over and over, that means you're doing something wrong, and you need to stop, reflect on what that is, and challenge and get to the root cause of those stories. Okay. The fourth battle is the battle of the spirit. This is the fourth element of a strong man. Okay. The spirit and the soul, I like to think of these as two separate things. All right. I like to think of your spirit as like your conscience, okay, which is ultimately like the Holy Spirit living within you. Okay. Your spirit is your will, your human will. Okay. And we've all heard these things before, like, oh man, you just saw, like, if you've seen fights, like if you've watched like MMA fights or boxing or anything like that, or even jiu-jitsu fights, and you're like, you can see the moment when the guy's spirit breaks. You can see that, right? It's like David Goggins talks about Rocky, how Rocky's his favorite movie, because I think it's Rocky 1, I think he said like in the 14th round or something like that, there's a moment when he calls it taking souls, but you can think of it as he broke his spirit. There's a moment when, Apollo Creed knocks down Rocky and he thinks he's won, but then he turns around and he sees Rocky get back up, and you just see the look in Apollo Creed's eyes, like his spirit breaks. His spirit breaks because he's like, what do I do to this guy? What do I got to do to keep this guy down, right? Which speaks to the spirit that Rocky had, right? And so we hear this a lot, right? And you can see that in a moment, whether it's, and this is why physicality is the training ground of the virtues, because it's in that moment that you get to see what someone is truly made of. It's in the moment of jiu-jitsu when you're getting freaking smashed by a bigger guy, and you can see the guy break. You can feel him break. I know this because I felt this, and I felt it with myself. And sometimes it works the other way. The guy on top that's done everything to smash, to submit, and the guy, he just can't tap the guy out. And you see his spirit break. There's a moment that happens. So we see this, we hear this like he broke his spirit. And so what does that mean? Well, he basically broke his will to continue, right? He broke his will to keep moving forward. And break a man's will to live, break his will to endure, and you'll crush and break his body, right? And I love this. It always reminds me of this quote from Bane. I'm going to do a horrible accent of Bane, but he's like, I was wondering what would break first, your spirit, and then he picks him up, or your body, and he freaking breaks him over, right? And so that spirit, if you're laughing, I know, horrible attempt at Bane. I actually have a good, for one of my close friends, Jimmy, he can do Bane really good. But you see these a lot in movies, right? I was wondering what was going to break first, your spirit or your body, right? And to strengthen your spirit, you have to strengthen your mind, your body, and emotions. So there's a very specific reason why we have the 5 elements of a strong man set up the way that they are. Starts in your mind, leads to your body. Through your body, you express your emotions, right? You don't just, you feel your emotions, but you also live and act your emotions. Someone that's very shy and timid, their body closes. Someone that is confident and strong and sure of themselves, they open themselves up to the world. So we also do emotions. And so there's a reason why I structure the 5 elements the way that they are. So it starts in your mind, then your body, and through your body you express your emotions. And then your spirit. To have a strong spirit, you have to have strong emotions, etc., strong mind, strong will, strong intellect. And so if you want to break a strong man, if you want to break a man, step 1 is to break his mind. And once you break his mind, you'll shatter his spirit. You'll break his body. Jesus said in the gospel, he says, "But no one can enter a strong man's house to plunder his property unless he first ties up the strong man. Then he can plunder his house." So how do you tie up a strong man? Well, by making him weak. You make him weak in the 5 elements. You make him weak mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and communally. If you can make a man weak in those elements, or if you can break any one of those elements, everything else will begin to crumble, everything else will begin to fall. And the world is doing that to us right now. Right, just look around you right now. We are being subverted ideologically. And step 1 of this subversion that's happening right now, it's happening in the church, it's happening in our government, destruction of the family, removal of the father from the house. Even if the father's still in the home, he's still removed from the house because he's no longer working and he's no longer being seen by his children. He's away earning an income, doing things like that, which is good, but he's no longer in the home physically teaching his children. I've struggled with this for years. Men have been struggling with this for years. And so step 1 in the subversion is to demoralize a man. And when I say demoralize, I don't mean to break his morale. I mean to literally break and separate him from his morals. To separate him from religion, to teach a man that he does not need religion. That is the first way, that is the first crack in the armor to a strong man. And men believe that today. Men are abandoning their religion. Men are leaving the church, the one true church founded by Christ in 33 AD, founded on Peter. Men are leaving the church because they have a disagreement. They don't like what the church teaches. And so they go and they start their own church. Now you've got, and as a result of that, you've got 40,000 plus different denominations of Protestant Christianity. Do you really think it pleases God to look down and see that there are 40,000 different denominations of Christianity? I would say no. There was one bridegroom, one bride. God, Christ, is not a polygamist. There is one bride of Christ, and Christ is the bridegroom. But that's step 1. To break a man from his morals. Because everything is a spiritual battle. You can show me anything, and there's a spiritual component to that at the root cause. So to demoralize a man means to remove him from his morals, to influence him with the pleasures of the world, to remove him from his religion, to remove him from his connection with his cause of being, and to replace it with things of the world, to replace it with spiritism, which is basically new age, palm reading, tarot cards, all this stuff. Ultimately, when you follow those, when you follow tarot card, palm readings, people telling you your future, all this, it's the work of the demonic. And the reason for that is because that gives, when you participate in that, you are giving over your power to somebody else. Somebody now has power over you. And that is what the wisdom was. Falling into the power of your neighbor. And so when you go to someone else to give you some spiritual reading, to read your palm, tarot card, you name it, that person now has power over you. And that is what fear is. Fear is not like, oh, I'm afraid. Fear is acknowledging that which has power over you. So you now have fear of that person, when the fear should be the fear of God, the fear of the Lord. That's what the fear of the Lord means. The fear of the Lord, it means you're acknowledging that God has power over you. And the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, is the beginning of knowledge. And knowledge leads to, from there you should seek understanding of the knowledge, and that understanding leads to wisdom, right? And so all of these things are step one to break a strong man, to demoralize a man. And then the gospel closes out. Jesus says, peace I leave you, my peace I give you, not as the world gives, do I give it to you. Do not let your hearts be troubled and afraid. You heard me tell you, I'm going away and I will come back to you. If you love me, you would rejoice that I am going to the Father, for the Father is greater than I. And now I have told you this before it happens, so that when it happens, you may believe. Right? So when he says, not as the world gives, do I give it to you. So Jesus there is promising, when he says, my peace I leave you, my peace I give you, what he's promising us there is he's promising us peace in the midst of conflict. Again, life's not going to be easy. It shouldn't be easy. Remember, in the desert with the Jews wandering in the desert, God gave the vipers and the snakes, and they bit and stung them, poisoned them. Well, when Moses bronzed the serpent and they looked up, confronted their problems, God didn't remove the vipers. He didn't remove the Romans. Like, even when Jesus came and everything, like, he didn't remove the Romans. They were still being suppressed by the Romans. He didn't remove the problem. Your problems will never be removed. Jesus didn't make excuses for us, right? He stepped in, obviously saved us, but this whole, like, being surety of your neighbor, like, you can't do the work for them. So he didn't remove the vipers from the desert. Right? We need the vipers. We need the conflicts. We need the challenges to make us better. We need to be tempered to become that samurai sword. So St. Augustine defines peace as the tranquility of order, quote unquote. He defines it as the tranquility of order. I'm going to quote St. Augustine here. He says, a deep trust, even in the midst of conflict. This trust and tranquility is what St. Paul calls the peace of God, which passes all understanding. This is the peace that Jesus promises. So this is William Barclay, quote, the peace which the world offers us comes from the avoidance of trouble and from refusing to face things. So this is where the proverb that I read in the beginning comes in. People that don't take responsibility, be mindful of who you take responsibility for, because those people are seeking peace, an easy life. I mean, they're trying to live a life of avoidance, right? The world will promise to fill your voids of materialism, with materialism, right? Food, alcohol, pornography, and all other vices. This is why whenever you give up, this is one of the things I don't like about the Lenten season. Let me correct myself. It's not what I don't like about the Lenten season. What I don't like about is how people approach the Lenten season. We give up something. Like, I've never given anything up. I've always tried to do something. I've always tried to acquire some kind of virtue. It doesn't make me better or anything, but I never liked the concept of giving something up. Because when most people approach it with giving something up, you're supposed to fill that void with Christ. You're supposed to fill that void with other virtues, not fill it with materialism and other things. And then when Lent is over, you go right back to that thing. You really didn't learn anything about the spirit of Lent. So the world promises us an easy life. We're expecting people to step in and to rescue us and to do the work for us when times get hard. To have surety for us. Just look around us, man. Like, laws are being passed to keep people from being offended. Like, no. St. Paul says it is necessary for us to undergo hardships to enter the kingdom of God. It is necessary for us to undergo hardships for the kingdom of God. Too many people wish for an easy life. People wish for a life without the cross. But Christ embraced his cross. He embraced it with a kiss. And he carried that thing. I want to say, like, the historians have said that the cross, whether it was a single pole or whatever, or a full cross, which I think if it was one trunk, I think it would be harder because he'd have to carry it like over his shoulders, like a yoke. Either way, I think they said it weighed around 200 pounds. And the distance to Calvary was like 3 miles. And so Jesus embraced his cross. He embraced those challenges. And we are called to suffer the exact same way. Everything Christ went through, we will go through to some extent. Christ suffered in the 5 elements of a strong man. He suffered in his mind. He suffered in his body, physically, his passion. He suffered in his emotions. He suffered spiritually. And he suffered for the community. A very specific reason why these 5 elements were put together the way that they did, the way that they were. And so we are called to that same suffering. And the same goes for our health. The same goes for our strength training. In those areas, we want the easy path. People want the diet pill. Let me eat. I see this like chocolate-looking syrup that people say that you eat and you'll lose body fat. No. Life is supposed to be hard. We want the better strength. We want the endurance. We want the fat loss. We want the body that comes along with that. We want all these things, but we don't want to put in the hard work. I would rather just take a pill. I would rather just drink this thing, eat this chocolate pudding. Like, I would rather just do. And guess what? There are companies out there that will sell you that. They will promise you all that, and they will sell you that. They will seek to fill that void. They will seek to attain surety for you and take responsibility for your results. But the way is hard, which leads to salvation. The way to a stronger mind, a stronger body, a stronger spirit, that way is hard. Quote, "It's supposed to be hard. That's what makes it great." End quote. That is Jimmy Dugan. Name that movie, A League of Their Own. Right? In the movie, she says, when she quit baseball, it just got too hard. And Jimmy Dugan says, "It's supposed to be hard. That's what makes it great." That's life. The harder the journey, the better man that you will be. The harder the journey, the better the life lessons. The better the life lesson, and the better the life lessons that you acquire, the bigger the gift that you'll bring back to your community. You know, I've always closed these episodes with peace. Looking back, I guess I realized, and what I read in these readings is, I guess I've always offered you peace in the same way that the world offers you peace, like Christ said. But now peace has a new meaning for me. And now the purpose for which I tell you peace at the end of these videos, I no longer offer you peace in the context of an easy life. I offer you peace the same way Christ offers you peace. I can't give you his peace, but I offer it in the same spirit that Christ offers you peace. And that the peace which offers you the opportunity to build a strong mind, a strong body, stronger emotions, a stronger spirit, to be stronger in your community. I offer you that peace to endure a difficult life, to build those 5 elements to endure a tough journey, to endure a tough life. Because, friend, we're not promised money, we're not promised cars, wealth, we're not promised happiness, we're not promised any of those things. We're promised a cross. And may the peace of God be with you to build the strength to endure that cross. That's all I got, man. Appreciate you watching. See you on the next one. Peace.